Okay, ladies and gentlemen, if we could take our seats, we'll get underway with our panel discussion. And of course, after that, we are going to have the AGM. And then we'll have our final speaker of the day, which Sue Gardner is here, and I know you want to hear from Sue. So if you could take your seats, we'll get going. Find my place here. Once again, my name's David Aiken, and I'm your moderator. My day job is at the National Post, but I'm very pleased to be here in Toronto today. I'm normally in Ottawa reporting on politics. All right, so it's time to turn to our panel discussion. We're going to focus on some big sky, blue sky things, the future of the internet as it relates to areas around internet innovation, around infrastructure, some of the policy discussions, some themes you've heard touched on by our speakers earlier today, content delivery, availability, consumption, and of course how this all affects us, our neighbors, our communities, Canadians. Jacques Latour, sitting right close to me here, is the Chief Technology Officer at CIRA. And he is an expert in internet security and architecture and is involved deeply in the global internet community. He's just told me after this he gets to go on vacation and he's going moose hunting. So you may want to ask him about that too as well. Andrew Clement is a professor emeritus in the Faculty of Information at the University of Toronto. There he coordinates the Information Policy Research Program, and he co-founded the Identity, Privacy, and Security Institute. Thank you very much for joining us, Andrew. And Jane Tallim is the co-executive director of MediaSmarts, Canada's Centre for Digital and Media Literacy. She's a former secondary school teacher and an internationally recognized expert in issues relating to media and youth. I think it's an excellent panel, great diverse backgrounds, interests, and I know we're going to enjoy the chat. Once again, if you've got some questions, just put your hand up and a CIRA person will come to your table with the microphone. We will try maybe get a little bit of your questions in a little later on in the panel here. But we're going to start with some big sort of just general questions, good or bad, things about the state of the internet, if you will, in the country. Jacques, I'll start with you. We have heard that you could make the case that the internet is not actually here, and that's because we don't have IXPs. We don't have our own, essentially, internet infrastructure, and that's been a big part of your life. Yeah. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? How are things on that front going for you?
So right now, the core internet for Canada, it's for all intent and purpose in the US. We don't have a real core internet in Canada. So what it means is Internet Exchange Point is the heart of the internet. And right now the majority of users are using the Internet Exchange Point located in New York, Chicago, Seattle, and so all US based. We have Torix in Toronto, which is a Toronto Internet Exchange. And that was for a long time the only internet exchange point here. And we need, the incumbents are not the incumbents, the Bell, the Roger, the TELUS, the vast majority of Canadian users are not participating in Torix. So most of our traffic flows in the US.
What's the hiccup there? Why not? Why aren't they participating? What's your sense?
So before we started, they didn't participate because we didn't have any, all we had was Toronto Internet Exchange and the one in Ottawa. So in the last 3 years, we built new Internet Exchange. So we built a core internet infrastructure from Vancouver to Halifax so that all the networks that are in Canada can connect to Canadian core internet. So this is, the good is we have a new infrastructure to connect. The bad is the incumbents, the big ISPs are not connecting to those Internet Exchange points.
All right, thank you, Jacques. Andrew, I want to come to you, that's the plumbing. Maybe let's be a little more philosophical and let me put it to you this way. The internet, good or bad thing? Is it a force for good, the internet, or a force for bad? I know you have some thoughts about that, particularly with the work you've done at the U of T about surveillance and freedom of expression and all those things. What's the state of the nation?
Well, the internet is itself not a force for good, bad, or anything else. It's what we do with it, what we make of it, and at this point, it's very varied. There's some fabulous things that people are using and developing the internet for, but particularly since the revelations of Edward Snowden about the way in which the state security agencies, the National Security Agency in the United States, and very probably Canadian security establishment here in Canada have built into the plumbing the capability of intercepting all of the traffic, which they then record, digest, analyze, fit with their threat profiles, that not just terrorists, but a whole range of threats. And that, right at the core of our internet, has poisoned the well as far as I'm concerned. And that we need to be able to understand that better and make those organizations more transparent and more accountable of what they're doing with the internet. And that is plumbing, and it's policy, it's politics. They're all wrapped up there, but we need to get that going now if we're going to have an internet in 10 years that we can trust and rely on. Otherwise, we're going to see it as the surveillance infrastructure par excellence, because all of our digital lives goes through those sites of surveillance. What does it mean for privacy and independence?
Let me dry out a bit on that. As I said, in my day job, I cover politics, and so one of the things that has been a big topic in political discussion is a bill called C-51. This was a bill passed by the Harper government. It was the anti-terrorism bill. The new Liberal government has promised to change some things it doesn't like. We still don't know to the extent it's going to change. But one of the things that they have said is they want to establish a new oversight committee of MPs to look at security services, including CSIS. So that's a policy response. Give me your thoughts, Andrew. Is things like that sufficient, or are more technical tools required to balance state versus citizen?
Well, way better oversight is absolutely necessary. Canada is the only country of the main ones in the Five Eyes who don't have at least some form of parliamentary oversight, but it is far from sufficient. There are many other aspects of that bill, C-51, the whole apparatus that needs to be basically questioned, and much better to repeal C-51 than to add a few things that will somehow make it all better. There are many deep aspects that would not be covered by parliamentary oversight.
Jane, let me come to you to talk about, we're sort of extending this in terms of safety of users and empowerment of individual users. And of course, it often comes to people knowing how the tools are built, knowing how the plumbing works, and then knowing how to use the tools themselves. What's the state of the nation? I assume we're getting better all the time, but give me what's sort of a top-level issues there for you?
Yes, well, our organization focuses on that next generation that's going to inherit the future internet that we're talking about, which is children and teens. So a lot of our work is looking at and understanding the skills that youth need to reflect their lived experiences, and just looking more generally at society. So when we look at digital literacy skills, we find it really interesting that over the years there's an acknowledgement that to be fully literate today, you need more than STEM skills. And I'm saying that respectfully, that STEM is an important part of it. But we also need a whole range of non-technical essential skills, skills for critical thinking, skills for collaboration, creativity, as Andy talked about during his talk at lunchtime. These are skills, resilience, that we want young people to know about. We want them to know about privacy rights. We want them to know about data collection. It's being informed and critical citizens and consumers in today's world. So the good news is we do see a growing awareness that these broader skills are needed. The challenge is, though, that our schools are having an incredibly hard time keeping up with both the cultural and the technical lives of today's youth. And that's where we really need to face the challenge and work together.
One of the, I'm sure a lot of you here in the room, I'm a parent, kids are sort of early teens, and they love Snapchat. And Snapchat presents a challenge for dad, who's, I'm a bit of a geek, because the content is not staying there. It's not necessarily being archived. It's hard for me to monitor. And I wonder if that's an issue nowadays, that there's this generation growing up and they want to participate in, my daughter wants it because she doesn't want people to see what she's saying, including her father. If that presents an issue for educators, for parents, those sorts of things, is it on the radar?
Well, that's why these broader skills become so important, because if adults try to keep up with the latest platform, it's a game of whack-a-mole. By the time you're hitting that app that your child's playing with over here, well, they're already over there, because let's face it, they don't want to be where mom and dad are. That's just a part of growing up.
Definitely on Snapchat.
Hate to break it to you. So it's really more important that we give our young people these skills so that they can weigh the possible consequences of what they're doing on whatever platform it is, that they understand the issues, that they understand how best to protect their privacy in all sorts of environments online. And that way they can transfer it from platform to platform in various situations. But the other thing you mentioned as a parent, the parenting piece is really not having the talk about technology. It's making just communication about technology part of your life in your family. And just having a conversation that's light, keep it going, you can sort of weave in the issues. It doesn't have to be this big, heavy thing.
Let me come back to Jacques on sort of state of Canadian infrastructure, the Canadian internet infrastructure. We saw the tool that CIRA is using for neighborhoods. Do we have something similar for the state of it in Canada? Are cities, towns, rurals, north? Give me your sense and availability, bandwidth, east-west by operator. What are your thoughts?
So, well, performance.cira.ca, that's our performance management tool. We measure this, that's the tool we use to measure the state. And in there, we measure bandwidth, the performance of end users. We measure the latency of the internet. And we measure if there's new protocols. The internet is an evolving infrastructure. And I would categorize today's internet as a 1999 infrastructure. So the protocols in the last 10 years have evolved, but the infrastructure in Canada did not upgrade. So IPv6, we talk about the future of the internet, it's the Internet of Things. We're gonna add billions of devices to the internet. The only way we can do that is with IPv6. So that's a new protocol for addressing.
Is that, say, telecom network operators not doing their work, institutions like universities, school boards? What's, in terms of making investments and coming to grips with modern infrastructure, where are people lagging?
The only good news on that front in Canada is TELUS in the last year has implemented IPv6 in their core network. So they're around 65% IPv6 enabled, and the rest is zero. So Bell, Rogers got a little bit. The government of Canada is not implementing IPv6. There's very low adoption of the IPv6 protocol across, and that's worrisome because people are selling Internet of Things, and that's...
We need an evangelist then for IPv6 then, it sounds
Yes.
like, or there's a space for somebody to be an evangelist for this
So we need
adoption.
Yes, but people are reluctant to adopt to change. So, and we're out of IPv4 today,
Right.
and it actually costs money, a lot of money to buy IPv4. So,
Once again, just if you'd like to jump in with a question, put your hand up and I will scout the room while I ask Andrew the next question. Okay, great. If there's a microphone right there, I'll be right there 2 seconds. Andrew, I wanted to ask about the value of Canadian internet sovereignty. I'm not sure if I'm using the right phrase here, but the idea that the infrastructure is Canadian or is under the control of provincial or federal authority, municipal authorities. Is that important? Does it make a difference to the internet experience and the ability of users to control their experience?
Yeah, I think sovereignty is a good word to use here. And Canada has a long history of its nationhood and sovereignty being built around the telecommunication and transportation infrastructures that can bind us together as a nation, as a set of communities for the whole range of things that we do together. I mean, we're in the Allstream building, and the history of Allstream is interesting. It grew out of CN and CP data communications, which was the first national network that was developed beginning over 100 years ago through the railways, the national dream. It was recently sold to Zio, which is a big US-based transit provider. So we are giving away, I mean, we're actually subsidizing in many ways, handing over key aspects of critical infrastructure that we need to ensure its reliability, say in the case of attack, or say being blocked by the U.S. if they're under threat.
If Donald Trump builds the wall, for example.
Well, yes. I mean, that you don't need to be too imaginative about that, or that they just get mad and whatever. So Canada has its citizens, its businesses are vulnerable in many ways. Unless we have a robust infrastructure that is within our collective control. And we also need to do that so that we can connect to other countries without having to go through, say, the United States. We have very little infrastructure of submarine fiber cables. So when I say that we need to assert some network, internet, data sovereignty. It's not that we want to isolate ourselves, but rather also connect better to the rest of the world.
Years ago, you mentioned railways. And this is a question for Jane. Years ago, I did a story on, this came out of the SchoolNet program. It was one of those things, and we were connecting libraries. And I visited a school in Clement, Ontario. Clement's in northwestern Ontario. And it's right on the rail line, and all at the time, I think they were OC3 or whatever our big pipes were that were going across the country at the time, was going right by Clement, and Clement had a one-room schoolhouse, and Clement had internet coming in at 2,400 baud, 3 web pages an hour, and it was living right on the big pipe, but it couldn't tap into the big pipe. Long way around of asking then, Jane, in terms of infrastructure for teachers, for learners, are we still at that stage where we need bandwidth everywhere? Have we moved up to just need gadgets, tablets, skills? What's the infrastructure need for learners and teachers?
Yeah, we did research last year with the Canadian Teachers Federation on teachers experienced with network devices in the classroom. And I was actually quite surprised that in our highly connected country, there are still teachers in a portable, and the school actually has access, but the portable doesn't. You also have all sorts of frustrations with technology. The schools will purchase the technology, but then it's the maintenance of the technology. Teachers told us quite clearly that they want to help their students do these things, but they want the training to do it properly, to make sure that they're integrating the technology in ways that are pedagogically sound. They also need to have assistance in maintaining the technology, and they do need more consistency in actually being able to access the bandwidth that they need. We had in one of the open-ended questions, we had teachers talking about being in the middle of lessons that they'd planned, and then just everything going kaput, which again it speaks again to Andy's program. We're having these creative partnerships where you have our education system being supported by organizations that can come into the schools, that have the technology, that can bring these programs in. I see that as a way to really help assist schools that may not have teachers that feel capable to teach at that level on their staff, and also schools that are having problems maintaining the technology itself.
There was a question over here. If you get, is it Andy? Yeah, it is Andy. So go ahead, jump in, and if you've got a question for a particular panelist or for them all, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. There we go. Okay, if you'd like to stand up and just let us know who you are.
Yes, my name is Bahman Yazdanfar. I'm a newbie here. It's my first time. But I notice, if I'm not mistaken, the panel are advocating the implementation of the policy and restrictions on the internet use. Am I correct? Before I address my question.
Implementing which is it? Could you just repeat?
Restriction and policies on the internet and the way they use.
They may not be. Do you want them to address that?
Yes, because you mentioned about the Bill C-51 and how far it can go, and the panel of the MPs that they can oversee the use of the internet. My question is, if there is such a policy, either through the Bill C-51 or otherwise, who is going to implement those policies? What is their criteria? What is their belief system? Does it interfere with the free speech?
Andrew, I'm sure you want to jump in here, but just let me clarify in case I maybe have misled. Yeah. So C-51 gives powers to groups like CSIS to do some monitoring of bad people on the internet and in other places. So in the sense that CSIS, which is already kind of spying on us online, has some additional powers to engage and spy on us online, that is what an MP, group of MPs would be overseeing, how CSIS or the RCMP is going about its business online. But Andrew, do you have a thought on that at all?
Well, in Bill C-51, there are powers given to CSIS, as you mentioned, that allow for interference, and that's the word that they use, for any activities that they deem sufficiently threatening. And they would do that covertly, and they can do that actually extra-constitutionally if they can get a federal judge to sign off on that. And that does represent a severe threat to freedom of expression, particularly of critical voices. And there's lots of debates going on, very lively debates in Canada right now, such around pipelines. That could be regarded as a threat to Canadian infrastructure. It's in there in the bill. And so those people who are organizing, say, a sit-in at a pipeline, as is currently going on in the United States, could then be targeted and interfered with by CSIS in secret. And that, I think, is an example of some of the things that we should worry about within C51 and the role that they have, or the access they have potentially through CSE to all of our internet communication.
And so the MPs committee would not be looking in on operational activity as well
I presume
of
not.
CSIS. It's very much a after the fact, how did you guys do this year? Did you get enough judicial warrants, et cetera?
I mean,
et
real
cetera?
oversight does involve sitting in, but I don't think that's contemplated in this case.
That's going to be a story ongoing this fall. You can read it in the National
Yeah,
Post.
there's a consultation going on. Yes.
Andy, you had a question. Yes, go ahead. Thank you, by the way, for that question.
I had a question about openness. I know one of the great things that CIRA does is promote an open internet. And my question is about open Internet of Things. Because we see a lot of companies creating these walled gardens that they control all the data within their walled garden of Internet of Things implementation. But then there's also protocols like MQTT and things that are open and that let people build their own Internet of Things. And I'm just wondering where you see things going in that kind of battle between the walled gardens versus the openness, and what can be done to sort of protect the open Internet of Things to let people build and understand their own Internet of Things.
Maybe I'll come to Jacques and then Jane on this one. Jacques, do you want to maybe start with that?
So, well, from a plumbing point of view, I guess, the Internet of Things, that's an overused term. So it means connecting billions of devices to the internet. And right now, a lot of the stuff that's developed, there's no security focus on the design of new application. And they also, today, we're developing Internet of Things application on old protocols like IPv4. So in the future, this is what we're working on, is that for your household, all the Internet of Things, that device that you have inside your house, you want to make sure that they are designed so that it doesn't leak out of your house. So like your watch can sync with your fridge, but not with your neighbor's fridge. And I'm sure it's going to happen. And so what we're looking at is to create...
What a world we live in. Yes.
Yeah. So we're looking at creating a secure domain inside the household with DNSSEC. That's a new protocol that not a lot of people are implementing. It's just starting. But it's to create a secure domain for your house where your watch, your fridge, your toaster, they know to use this protocol, this key to encrypt all the traffic so that it can be just for your house and it doesn't leak out. So people are thinking of the future. Right now, we're thinking how to do that. The challenge that we have is the core infrastructure today is not designed to support Internet of Things the way it should be. So we have a challenge. We have a great opportunity to build in the right way, but it's going to take us a lot of work to get there.
Jane, do you have some thoughts on what Andy raised there?
Yeah, and mine is going to turn just more to the understanding, especially by youth, because it's really interesting that you bring up Internet of Things, because again, it's the water that they're swimming in. And we have found with youth that they tend to be very vigilant when it comes to privacy that has social aspects. So many youth are really good at using their privacy features on their social media sites to control friends, family, other peers, to control audience. They tend to be very, very savvy. But when it comes to data collection, there is a real gap. We find there's very little understanding of a lot of the regulations that exist surrounding youth in particular and data collection online. We also find that there's real contradictions. For example, some youth, I think a quarter of youth told us that they like it when companies that use what they post to sell things to them, even though 83% said they don't like companies reading what they put online. And a majority also want more control over the things that they post. And they're also very, very skeptical of companies. Companies that want to advertise to me tied with strangers as the least desirable group to know where kids were using geolocational devices and apps. So it's a real disconnect where on one hand they are savvy, but they're also very naive. Only 60% of youth that we surveyed in our last phase of research said that anyone had ever explained a privacy policy to them. So there's a real gap here in understanding the broader implications of what we're talking about and what you're talking about.
Very interesting. I'm going to come to you in just a second. If you want to grab a microphone, just put your hand up until a microphone shows up there. Security. Andrew, security threats. Bigger threat from state actors or commercial actors? I'm assuming there's a bit of both there, but what's your sense?
Well, of course, that's very
different kinds of threats too, from
broad.
on.
Yeah, I would say I'll argue for claiming that the security threats from state actors is the most serious because it threatens the institutions of a democratic society, our ability to make decisions as citizens, within a sort of democratic governance arena where you can speak freely, associate freely, and so on. And when all of your communications are being intercepted and accessible by state agencies, we know that the NSA lies about it. They lie in public with impunity about what they're doing. They're completely unaccountable as far as we can see. They have not earned the trust that is necessary. So I would say that the long-term threat from an unfettered state security apparatus that has its tentacles deep into our networks in an unfettered way is the most serious threat. Now, you mentioned commercial or corporate. Of course, the access that state actors have, state agencies have to our data is through those organizations, through the telecom carriers and through the big internet service providers. So I wouldn't like to try and separate too much between whether it's corporate or government. They are joined at the hip or joined at the network in many cases. So I think that's a big area that we need to be concerned about.
Jacques, let me ask you, as we think about the plumbing, and IPv6 is more secure than IPv4. What's this? Are we building more secure networks? Are there some holes in our network here in Canada that somebody's got to start paying attention to?
Not so. No, there's no hole per se. The challenge, like the security challenge we have right now, facing infrastructure, they're DDoS. Those are distributed denials of service attacks.
And we heard, I think Byron mentioned those in his presentation.
It's a bunch of people sending traffic to one host, and you can bring your network down. So infrastructure-wise, the challenge is these attacks, the DDoS, are getting bigger and bigger. They can reach 400 or 500 gigabits per second, which can take down pretty much any business in Canada, can take down chunks of networks. So the bad news is it's getting more sophisticated, and they're hard to stop also, because the attacker are getting more sophisticated in how they generate their DDoS. The other aspect is malware. That's the other thing. The state of the malware, all the new viruses that exist, most often they're more advanced than the antivirus detection tool. So we'll know. You don't know right away if you're impacted with malware. Your antivirus doesn't see that. So the bad actors are getting more and more sophisticated. So we need to, on our side, develop infrastructure and services to be resilient against big attack, and make sure you don't click on every link in every email.
It's sort of simple. There was a question over here. If there's a microphone, there you go. Just tell us who you are and if you've got a question for a specific panelist.
My name is Hamid Rahman. I'm a technical writer between language and technology. I've got two questions. Yesterday I was in the offices of Google, and I had a whole session about how, and all the apps that they control and all the ways that Google can know who I am, what are my choices, what I talk about, and how this is then being marketed to companies in order that they can sell me goods, or they can. So it's eavesdropping, very openly done. So when we're talking about the internet and the danger of the internet, it seems to me that this one, which is so open and which is so pervasive, is there, and we don't seem to be talking about it and what it does in terms of channeling or shaping out our choices and the choices that our kids do make, etc. Now, the other question that I had is, I'm a Muslim, and my name, and in the world we live today, I'm very conscious of who I am and what I represent. And in the world where almost every day, almost every week, there are terrorist attacks around the world, unfortunately related to people who are my faith, or apparently my faith. And if an attack were to happen in Toronto, and the police did not do their due diligence in terms of investigation or taking precautions, they will be blamed. So I'm very conscious of the fact that much of this detective work goes through the surveillance that happens through the internet today and communications. So how does one go back to a world where there wouldn't be that level of surveillance in order to go back and we could say, yes, my privacy is being maintained, and yet at the same time wanting to live in a world which is secure from the threats of terrorism? I'm not too sure.
I'll sum up your question. It's a feature until it's a bug, pretty much. It's sort of the way it works.
So
Google's great until, in the same
what
thing.
I'm saying is I'm a realist. I'm seeing the world I live, and I can hear the panelists protesting against the surveillance that goes on. And at the same time, if tomorrow something were to happen, then all fingers will be pointing to the
To CISA saying, why didn't you know about it?
Yes.
And
So
track it
how
down.
does one now go back to that world which we knew, let's say 50 years back or 40 years back or whatever?
Toothpaste back in the surveillance tube. Andrew, can you do that?
How many hours do we have to answer that very serious?
But that's the big question in
That's the
society
big
today,
question,
yeah.
and we could have conferences, and there are conferences on that. But I'll just try to be concise about some of the things that we do. I would say that the security agencies have a difficult, necessary job, and I don't envy their position at all. But I think there's an over-insistence on secrecy, so that they undermine the trust that is necessary for them to operate in a way that we can say, it's okay that you do certain things because we know that you are very circumspect, that you have very targeted sort of threat profiles that you're working with, and that you are protective of all the others. But when we look and see what they're actually doing, they're using very broad threat profiles. They're stereotyping of the worst kind. Although there's masses of data, the analytics are deeply primitive and colored so much by prejudice that we can't trust them. And so they have to come clean with us, so that when they talk about what they do and they say that they follow the law, we have an actual basis for saying, yeah, I agree. But at this point, from what I've seen, they haven't earned that trust. On the point of view of the citizenry, I think we also have to know and understand much more about how these things work and our own role in contributing to them. And so there's a big education job. And I don't say that we should just say that they're all bad, the surveillance agencies. They're dealing with a difficult situation. But I think that we need to understand much better this security or insecurity landscape that we're working with and understand where insecurities come from. And so to answer your fundamental question, how can we go back to a safer world? There's a lot of things that we can do in foreign policy and the way in which we treat minorities in third countries to reduce the incidents that make people angry with us. And if there are angry people around the world, no security apparatus is going to stop attacks that we've seen even on the weekend. Right? It's too easy. We have an open society. You can go into stores and buy things, you can put things elsewhere, and that's important. We need to preserve that. But we have to stop getting so many people angry.
I was going to ask, is there anybody from CSIS or CSE by any chance?
I'd love to talk to you.
In the room? And that's at a tech conference. I don't know, how many have been to DEF CON down in Las Vegas? Yeah, Emily won't admit it, exactly. DEF CON, it's a Vegas conference. I cut up a couple of times, and it's filled with Pentagon, military governors, and they have a contest called, Spot the Fed, in which the geeks try to figure out which is the guy who's probably working for CSIS. I encourage you, if you've ever been to DEF CON, it's a fun place.
Spoke there in a black T-shirt.
There
So
you
he
go.
was trying to be...
Trying to be hip.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Was there one more question? There's one right here. Yes, we could, the panelists, we were just saying before we came on, we could talk about a lot of these issues, as Andrew just noted, for another couple hours, but we'll have a question here.
Oh, thank you. Hi, my name's David. I have a couple of questions with regard to the CIRA strategic go-to-market plans. Accessibility is
David, can I just interrupt for a second, David? Would it be best maybe to ask that question during the annual meeting, do you think?
Okay,
Would
yeah.
that be, because I'm certain that's a question that the CIRA board would probably like to, and I see nodding at the CIRA board table.
Yeah,
Would you mind
okay.
coming back with your question in about 20 minutes? I think that would be, probably our panelists again, would you agree, unless you wanted to?
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Is that okay? Thank you, David. There's a hand up right down front here, and, oh, there's one right there. Okay, we'll go there where the mic is, and then come to here. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Zaina Danieli. I'm an entrepreneur, actually as part funded by your Better Online Canada program, but also work in the healthcare sector. And it kind of ties back to the previous question that we have, but from the healthcare perspective, because there seem to be amazing solutions and opportunities to make people's life better through the internet, but there seemed to be a gap by the ability of healthcare organizations to adopt those innovations because of legitimate worries and concerns about privacy issues and confidentiality. So how can we, my question is, how can we better bridge that gap and do a better job at embracing innovation and yet keeping people's confidentiality secure?
Jane, can I throw this to you? Again, understanding how to work things, and yeah, healthcare is something that maybe not as kids, but they are going to go to the internet and try and diagnose themselves with whatever ailment at some point in time. Have you ever got any thoughts on that?
Yeah. There's two elements to that, and just in direct response to what you were saying, although I don't know the technical aspects of it, but just hearkening to what Andrew said earlier, you really do need trust. Trust is such a core part, and trust has to be earned of anything online where we're giving up our personal information, where we're sharing things. And I think transparency and trust and security are three essential elements to a really vibrant internet. And then from the education piece, it's helping citizens of all ages, not just kids, recognize those secure places where they can share things. With youth in particular, it's helping them recognize who are authoritative sources online. You can find communities for everything on the internet, and young people do go online looking for health information, sexual health information, mental health information. So a lot of the education piece with youth is steering them towards websites, number one, that we know are accredited, but also helping them learn how to authenticate websites and material that they encounter as well.
And on that, unfortunately, I know I said I'd take one more question, but we have to move on to really what is the important part of the day's business. We're already running a little bit behind. So I want to thank Jane, Andrew, and Jacques. Please thank our panelists. That was a very interesting discussion. Wish we could have gone on longer. And I should note that just as we finished there, I've just got a little ding on my cell phone. You may have as well, that I get Reuters alerts. Yahoo has had 500 million user accounts stolen. So take a look at right now on your thing. 500 million. There we go. That would have been a nice. We're going to have Claude Gallipo here from Yahoo Canada. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it, and he may be in a meeting right now, anyways, if that's the case. So thank you very much, guys. Appreciate that.